Hello. Let's begin the Q&A session. First raiser.
I was just wondering if China can still be considered as strictly communist in this sense, given that the fact that the Chinese economy is now more open than it was before.
So I expect that Chinese economy will be more open.
Yes, that's right.
But after all, they declare open and reform are the prerequisite for their development. And also, since 1978, when the Deng Xiaoping declared open and reform, is the first and most foremost policy they pursue. So the general trend lies in that direction, I believe. Of course, the foreign entrepreneur has complained that the system, or particularly the legal judiciary system, is not same as that of in other countries. I myself sometimes whether this country is governed by law or by person. But the years goes by, I believe that that kind of complaints will be reduced because the government is very strong to govern all things by law.
So, but still, the socialist market economy means that's not the real market economy, I must say. So there is a quite similarity between the market economy and the socialist market economy, but at the same time there is some difference. So any foreign investor is very much cautious about what's going on in China, and then year by year there has been some change. So, but the general direction is more widened, more open their society, but still not level as much as that in other Western countries. So I'm wondering whether my explanation could meet your question. Okay, next.
Okay, yeah, I'm also here. So thank you very much for the presentation. My question is actually about the part of your presentation about the basic requirements. I was wondering how much of these basic requirements are followed by Korea and, well, obviously China, and how much of influence does the United States have on Korea to follow these basic requirements of, like having a better relationship in the future?
Well, I must confess that I'm too old to understand through the speakers. Really, not clear to me. So
Okay, let me ask you again.
So the point could you repeat?
I was just wondering how much of influence does the United States have on Korea as following the basic requirements for having a better relationship with China in the future?
You mean some delicate relations between United States and China vis-a-vis Korea?
Yes.
Well, after all, when I was in the foreign ministry and making any kind of decision, of course we consider many factors. The alliance with the United States is also always a standing consideration aspect. But in real question, real problems, I believe we better independently decide what's going on, what we are going to do with China. And then I don't believe that the United States try to make any kind of direct influence on Korea when they make any kind of decision. But Korea should be well aware of the geopolitical situation surrounding himself. We, after all, have a good alliance with the United States, while we are now in the strategic cooperative partnership with China. So both are not zero-sum game. We should be good to have good relationship with both two parts. So sometimes China would like to make a certain influence on Korea when he has something to do with United States, and the other might be the versus. It's the same true. But I hope that my Korean colleagues in the foreign ministry as well as in other authority, the agencies, to make his own decision only under the basis of national interest, independent national interest. Sometimes it is very close to the United States, sometimes it is very close to Chinese. But after all, we should protect our Korea should protect his national interests first, with certain consideration for China as well as United States. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. My question is about China and the United States. So after the Trump got elected, the United States government is more focused on the U.S. internal issues as well. For example, the Trump says that America first always. So this
I think I should come to anybody who make a question close while you use the microphone, because the voices through the the speaker are not clear to my ears. So I better go to. Okay. Well, same the situation I feel, so that the yeah.
So I just come here and ask my question. I think it's much.
Yeah. Well, you better use your microphone for your colleagues.
Okay. Okay, I wanted to ask about the relation, the U.S. and China soft power. Of course, in terms of hard power, military power, the U.S. is much more stronger. We cannot compare with China. In terms of soft power, China is rising much more in Asia, in Africa, I believe, also in Latin America. So after the U.S., the new U.S. president, their policy is more the U.S. Concentrated on the United States. For example, the Trump says America first, and they are not. They are leaving some international agreements like Paris climate change, and they are reviewing many of their FTAs. Do you think this is a golden chance for China to increase their soft power over other countries in Africa or, for example, in Asia?
Well, we have very unprecedented president in the United States. That's I feel. Mr. Trump, of course, elected by the American citizen, but the is some difference I've got since his when I heard his remarks or his attitude. Of course, he declared American first. His campaign was American first, and then to increase the American first policy. While China, long time, tried to be long-time friend to developing countries, although their economy was not enough to make a good assistance to many developing countries, but they did for African, and Latin America. We can see some decreasing sign of American leadership in the world, particularly when Mr. Trump declares American firstnism. But as I already mentioned, that its economic power as well as military power is not compared to any from other countries. Although Mr. Trump has his own personal view or personal inclination, many American politicians and decision makers feel that America should lead the nation under the universal value prevailing, you know. So China, at the same time, has continued to develop itself, reaching to be called as G2. When they were not enough to provide any assistance to foreign countries, they did. Now they have a capable of making good assistance to many other developing countries. And President Xi declared that he is willing to, he has intention to make more assistance, to make a more contribution to a better world. So it's nothing directly related to the current attitude of Mr. Trump with some positive sign from China. I think their national policy is provide more to the developing countries. So their contribution will be bigger than before, while still I believe the American leadership could prevail in worldwide, although Mr. Trump is not so positive in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Just sort of continuing with the sort of theme with President Trump, obviously. President Trump and President Xi have had several meetings since Trump was elected last year. How do you see China cooperating with the United States on the issue of North Korea and reunification?
Reunification of Korea.
Yeah.
Well, not only these issues relating to Korean Peninsula, but on many issues concerned, sometimes they will cooperate, or sometimes they will compete, or sometimes they were in confrontation. The recent visit of Mr. Trump to China was quite successful in his terms. We expect something new or something fascinating relating to North Korean issues to come out, but unfortunately, there is no noticeable outcome of this meeting vis-a-vis North Korean question. North Korea is still believed, to my judgment, a strategic asset for China, particularly vis-a-vis US-related matter. Although the North Korea made very wrongdoing and violating the international law and many resolutions adopted by the United Nations Security Council. Well, the other day, the US designated North Korea as terrorist assisting country again, terrorist country. So I hope two big powers could have more in agreement while dealing with North Korea, but there is certain limitation. But after all, they are all P5 who's responsible for world affairs, particularly non-proliferation issue. So it's their duty to solve the question, solve the North Korean nuclear question. So at least the nuclear question should be solved through the cooperation between two big powers. That's my hope. But reality, could have seen differently. But at the moment, North Korea doesn't want any dialogue, only waiting for the time. Seems to waiting for the time to show their another military big capabilities by testing another nuclear testing, conducting a nuclear test as well as launching long-range missile. So I believe not only United States, but China and international society as a whole should get united to make a certain decision, to make action, to show action that we cannot accept the North Korean adventurous provocation anymore. So, return to your question, there would be sometimes cooperation, sometimes confrontation, but vis-à-vis the North Korean nuclear question, they are obliged to make a good cooperation to each other. Thank you.
You said that North Korea and China still have a close relationship, but recently China banned all travel to North Korea. Most view that as them severing ties with North Korea. What would you interpret that as? Instead of it, like, would you say that they're now backing away from North Korea to become closer to South Korea and the U.S., or are they just severing ties with a controversial country? Well, China just recently banned all travel to North Korea, and you said that China and North Korea are still very close, but with this recent ban, would you say that now China is severing all ties with North Korea, or are they just like ending I guess.
Well, the U.S. resolution regarding North Korea nuclear test stipulate quite items which should be observed by the member states of United Nations. I don't believe that the banning of tourists to North Korea is included in the resolution. But certainly there is the stop of trade, stop of importation from North Korea, particularly in coal and some textiles, and then the labor forces they cannot utilize for making products or something like that. I think if the China bans Chinese tourists to visit North Korea, it's because mostly their own policy. Yeah. To visit North Korea is not the ban, but the situation in the North Korea are not so safe. I mean, predictable. So they make temporary certain measure not to encourage Chinese tourists falling into any jeopardy in North Korea. But there are quite a number of items which are prohibited by the resolutions adopted in the United Nations Security Council. And then many countries are supposed not to receive any visit of North Korea, some relating to developing nuclear capabilities or developing missile. So those are the items list of prohibit by the UN Security Council. So that question regarding the tourist ban, I don't believe is in the list. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. Okay. Well, you talk a lot about the economic situation, right? So how China has grown economically, but I want to ask you more about human rights. So there has been a lot of North Korean people like going to China to get to South Korea because they cannot cross the DMZ. So, but they do not have the refugee status there. So I would like to know what has South Korea done to pressure or to raise awareness of the situation of North Koreans in China, like for China to change that policy?
Thank you. I think easy way and convenient way to respond. If I hear it at your side, then I can reply using this microphone. Yeah. Okay. Well, the North Korean refugee is one of the very serious and thorny questions whenever I was in Beijing, in Seoul. We try to convince, persuade Chinese authority, please take it only through humanitarian consideration. While the Chinese replied, it's the matter of legal matter. North Korean who crossed the border illegally. So it's directly linked to their, the legal matters. Yeah. So there is always kind of confrontation, and it depends on situation. When there is a good mood between China and South Korea, some North Korean refugee cases handled relatively easily, while the relations are not so good enough. Then those miserable North Korean has been deported to North Korea, despite of our continued appeal. So we cannot dismiss the aspect of legality on this matter. At the same time, we hope that China would pay more attention in the humanitarian aspect on this matter. Now, China declared by his lengthy report at the National Congress of Communist Party, China wants to be building a shared value of mankind and making a good contribution for betterment of mankind. And then this is absolutely related to humanitarian aspect. So I do hope that the stance and position of Chinese government vis-a-vis North Korean refugee could be better than before. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, my question is about the recent news of the normalization
Your question relating what?
to the normalization of relations between China and Republic of Korea. After thought, recent news about how the two countries are, how China is open to restore its relations with Korea. Like for example, the economic fallout that arose after the deployment of THAAD. What do you think are the main reasons for China to be open to restore relations with Republic of Korea, and how does this normalization affect the dynamic of the North Korean nuclear problem?
Well, to find a certain better way to solve the North Korean nuclear question is standing tasks, challenges, and problems which both countries try to find, So to do with the North Korean nuclear question has nothing to do with the current problem between China and Korea in relating to the THAAD deployment in Korea. About THAAD deployment, every country has its own sovereign right how to defend his country. So I think my government decision to deploy THAAD in my territory is absolutely legitimate. Of course, we understand why China has a different opinion, because saying that THAAD deployment undermined, making a bad impact on their strategic security interest. My personal view is Chinese concern was not proportionate with that has, I mean, the proportionate with the real fact. I mean, their reason to be against this deployment lies first is against their strategic, the national interest. That means when there would be a nuclear war between China and certain countries, that radar system of THAAD will function against their national interest, their strategic interest. But our cause to have the THAAD system in Korea is directly linked to our life and death question. We are obliged to deploy that system because of imminent North Korean threat with nuclear bomb and long and medium and short-range missile. So it's a real question. But when you think about possible nuclear war, this is, well, it's not real. If that kind of war happened, everybody will be destroyed. So it's not proportionate between the concerns what South Korea has and that of China. But anyhow, the October 31, the agreement between two authorities concerned has agreed to restore the relations which is now harmed more or less back to the normal. I think it's good agreement. But still, they declare, I mean China, make it clear that they are opposing to deployment, while the South Korea has made an explanation why we have. So I hope that China will be in the position to understand the real reason of South Korea with regard to the deployment of THAAD system in Korea. And, well, as I said already, the exchange of people and goods is quite general, I mean the unavoidable. Yeah. So such a intentional rupture of the exchange are not natural. So we will go back to the normal, having good, the strengthening our bilateral relations of mutually beneficial to each other. Thank you. Here.
Thank you for your presentation. President Xi successfully consolidated his power when he got re-elected as the Communist Party's leader. So I was wondering how these developments may affect Korea-China relations.
Well, President Xi is very friendly to Korea in a word. When I was in Beijing, I had a delegation from Korea to send the message of President-elected then in 2013 to President Xi. We were all surprised to hear that his knowledge on Korea before, when we were under the imperial occupation. He mentioned by himself certain name of Korea, very much famous patriots, Kim Gu and even monks. So I'm very happy to see that he continues his role as a General Secretary as well as President of China for 5 more years. Well, it's a matter of fact. Well, when he was elected 5 years ago, everybody would believe, has the same feeling that he will continue after 5 years. So it's quite natural. But after 5 years, so far, as I already explained, that the 2 terms for General Secretary, 2 terms for the President was kind of a practice, which Deng Xiaoping designed to set up. So I'm wondering whether he will, ignore such presence. Well, of course, you have a good, China has a good reason to do so because they are supposed to celebrate 100th anniversary of the Communist Party establishment. But I don't know. But in case when he continue to his presidentship or general secretary's job after 5 years from now on, I better decline make a comment. Thank you.
My question is about developing countries. Like, for example, right now, developing countries has a lot of influence of the Western societies, Western culture. I mean, democracy, or you have to do some stuff in order to develop. However, we have seen that countries like China and other ones like Singapore or even the Emirates have developed with another type of political culture. So do you think that China is in a good position to spread their political culture or political system?
Well, as I put some characteristics, identity of China, first I refer the Chinese Communist Party, one political party system there. Well, everybody has their own evaluation, whether it's good or whether it's not. But I do believe it's really Chinese who decide, who has a right to choose their own political system. Of course, somebody wants to make it clear that the democracy cannot be sustained only with one party. But Chinese insist we are doing our socialistic policy with our own characteristics. What characteristics? We don't have such a big country whose population 1.4 billion. We don't have such countries whose ethnic minority over 55. We don't have such countries who suffers a lot of foreign aggression, particularly in 19th century. Every country has their own special situation, like Korea. We are only the divided country in the world at this moment. We were engaged in societal, brothers' law for 3 years. We are the unique in that sense. So China is unique for themselves. So we better, I always said to my Korean colleagues, just see it as a fact. So we don't have to pay any value-oriented evaluation. That's my personal feeling. So, but China cannot export his political system to others. Of course, some other countries has a choice, their right to choose. Like, some in Latin America, they are working for hard, some kind of populist policy, and then we see the result. So China, okay, you have a right to keep your own unique political system, but don't try to make any attempt to export that kind of political system. When in 60s and even in 70s, there are some faction in certain developing country who, quite respect the certain ism, close to the China. But as long as China has their own right to choose their own choice, choose their own system, no one can either direct or whether it is good or not, they can insist. This is my personal view. Well, there are some others who may have a different idea, particularly from the Western world. Of course, I'm also in the aspiration for universal value, consisting of human rights and freedom of press and democracy. Of course, China is always saying the democratic way, democracy, and people's democracy. So there are several interpretations. What is democracy? Democracy. So sometimes we have our Korean democracy in 1980s, 70s and 70s. I was very hurried. I was very busy to explain what is Korean democracy when I was a young diplomat. But we don't have to have certain, the expression like democracy is democracy, not Korean democracy or Chinese democracy or Western democracy. There's one democracy. That's my belief. Okay? My last question, no, one more time, 10 minutes about.
So thank you for your presentation. My question relates to the border dispute between China and India in Doklam and Bhutan. So my question is, how do you think it should be resolved particularly between Bhutan and China, with China clearly willing to increase their influence and dependence of Bhutan to the Chinese government?
Well, I know that the India and China has a long time the border questions, and quite recently they agree to settle down such a border issue between two of them. But it's the first time to hear that Bhutan has a border problem with China. And then those long time questions, border question between China and India was solved through dialogue. Of course, there is a military, action between two of them, particularly on the Himalaya side or something like that. But there was some cases, however, but the solution was made through dialogue, discussion. So I hope that the original border question between Bhutan and China, however, the solution is very clear through dialogue and discussion. Well, for Korea, we are, in some sense, a small country. Our territory is only 100,000 square kilometers, while China is 9.6 million square kilometers. So sometimes, such a big country can be more, generous with regard to territorial question, but it's not true. It's never happened. So territory is observed, is one of the top priority national interests. So one should fight, one should not physically meaning, but one try to make their best to convince the region, our region, to the other counterpart. So I hope that that border question could be solved through peaceful dialogue. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your a lot of questions, and I feel regret that my hearing was not good enough to have a very exchange of questions in more comfortable way. But anyhow, it is very unique and very precious time for me, particularly. I'm now this year 66 years, but I have so happy to have such a young generation which continue to give a kind of energy with which I can spend today quite well. Thank you so much. Goodbye.